Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. Storage Authority team hosting another webinar. We're doing this on the first Thursday of every month. Next one's going to be October 3rd, at 1 p.m. So Eastern time, that is. So appreciate everybody taking the time, and hopefully we can help you on your development projects. But we're really going to go in depth and cover some topics on the minefields of development and really avoiding them. And projects can be made or lost through the development process. So, it's a great topic that we'll deep dive on. We hope you guys share your questions, but if not, we'll cover the topics that we have planned out. Real quick on the intros, we have 100 years of experience on our Storage Authority team. Kevin Harless, he's our development director. His role in our company or responsibility is help our owners find land. So he's the conduit on working hand in hand with them. We got a special guest, Drew Case. He's our development director. I'm sorry, not development, operations director. 30 years of experience there. And then our CEO, Marc Gooden, he's been in our space for 30 plus years, owns self-storage, designs, consults. So, huge value for our owners that sign in with Storage Authority. And myself, I joined the industry back in 2009, been with Storage Authority, since 2016. We help busy professionals, find land, get developed, get approved, run a first-class facility. The goal is, early retirement, great real estate nest egg. So that's our team, and just to jump in and hopefully everybody, sent in some early on questions. We did get that, but participation wise, we have most everybody on mute. Feel free to unmute if you have a question. You could put your questions in the chat, whether directly to me or to everybody, or raise your hand and I'll call on you. But, definitely fire away any questions, to get rolling. If anybody has any questions they want to start with, otherwise I'm gonna throw a question over to Marc. All right, Marc. So, big question is, where are we at in the industry? Where we at right now? Where do you see us going? It's been a tough, 18 months with these interest rates. Where do you see us heading next?
Well, right now, Garrett, and first, thanks everybody for joining in with us. Right now, I do believe we're at a turning point that we wish had come a year or two ago. People are either looking back a year or forward a year. And until right now, they've been looking back a year, and all they've been seeing is bad news: high interest rates, high construction costs, high inflation. But right now, they're starting to look forward for a year, and they're seeing a lot of good news. Lower inflation, lower interest rates, more opportunities to build self-storage. More homes being sold equals more rentals equals higher rent rate. So we're at that inflection point, and I can actually see it. Right here at Storage Authority, I could see it because I'll tell you, quite frankly, the first half of the year has been slow. People just didn't have a mindset of working hard, giving all these tough factors, but people's mindset has changed in the last 30 days. And in fact, in the last 30 days, we have a new 90,000 square foot facility that's under construction. In 30 days, they're already ready to start the foundations. They've done the clearing. We have an offer on a conversion that was just accepted in the last 30 days. And literally, they bought that property for under $1.5 million, an incredible deal because they got the building almost for free. We've got another project, 80,000 square feet in Virginia. It's out for a bid. Again, they've changed their game plans to meet what's going on. Instead of building half, they're building the whole thing all at once. And actually, right now, we have 2 more properties that we hope to have under contract this month. So things are looking good. Now it really is an inflection turning point. Now it's the time to get back to the basics, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, just to add to that, I kind of have the theory of the great transition that'll be coming. We are in the transition business, being self-storage, but nobody can move right now. A couple of years ago, we did 6 million transactions in real estate, and now we're down to 4 million. So as soon as when that spigot gets turned back on and interest rates start coming down, there's going to be a huge demand for our industry. Another quick question to you, Marc. Obviously, this is a big minefield that owners see as, quitting before they find land. They have the goal, they want to get going, and then all of a sudden it just, kind of sputters out and it gets hard and they quit. What do you say to that?
Well, the number one failure has been and always will be quitting before you find land in self-storage. That is not going to change ever. And it really takes three things to find land: tools and a system, consistent effort for 6 to 12 months at least. You're looking to review 100 properties, make an offer on 3 properties, and buy 1 property. So it really takes that effort and consistency. But the last point is, and this one's a little bit harder, it takes some insight to help look at properties, to help move forward, with some insight. And insight takes years of experience, and that's why you need a team. But with some insight, you can quickly reject a property, in many properties, in 15 minutes. And then you can reject most of the other sites that you look at in an hour. And part of that insight is understanding design and understanding the construction. And it's easy for me because I've been doing it for so long, but for new people, you really have to, look into these things, because we're finding a lot of properties. I can think of 3 right now that most people rejected for self-storage because they didn't have the insight on how to make it work. They didn't have the insight on how to talk to the staff. They didn't have the insight to look at it a different way. So that's why you need your civil engineer and your architect talking together early. So that's the biggest development failure. And I just want to tell you the second biggest development failure, and that's getting off to a slow start. Looking at a property today, looking at another property an hour from now, a day from now, and 2 days. Kevin has certainly pointed out that a lot of our franchisees look at 1 property at a time, and that means 3 weeks to find it, 3 weeks to review it. It was two months, and then they're on to the next property. That gives you 6 properties a year. And to prove that's not the way to go, and that you can find land, in less than 2 weeks, he went out and in 1 state found 15 pieces of property that were worth further review. So, you've got to have that help, and you want to be off to a fast start. This is painful. When we see somebody fail, it's usually because they got off to a slow start, and they never recovered from that.
Evan, I'll throw you a question here. What's one of the number 1 mistakes developers make that can cause them to possibly lose their land or create a significant hardship that you see?
Well, of course, there's all kinds of mistakes developers can make to cause those things, Garrett. But one of the number 1 things I think that they see is they don't secure proper zonings or permits early in the process. They go out there, they find a piece of land, they fall in love with it. They don't do the right due diligence with the city. They don't go take the temperature of the city or the area that they're in. They get into the project and then realize that the city's not going to approve this. And so they've wasted a lot of time, effort, and sometimes even money when they don't do the right things by finding out what it's going to take to get that particular development permitted through the city.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anything to add there, Marc?
One quick tip: when you go into, early on, you can make a phone call and get some information. Great. Sometimes they'll tell you self-storage permitted in that zone. It's not. But early on, you want to go in and actually meet with the town. If you can, take your civil engineer, take a sketch. I don't care if it's a little chicken hand sketch, and put it on the map, because, that'll get them to speak up more. But I've been in this civil engineering business, over 1,000 site plans approved. I've never had 1 denied. And maybe, yeah, if some of those I didn't talk to the town and found out there was no way, they would have been denied. But what's the purpose of going through a process and spending 50 grand on site plans and architectural plans if you're just going to get denied? And not only that, you go into the town, you might not get denied, but there's a lot of things that your civil engineer and certainly you are going to overlook. So Kevin is right. Immediately, once you find out that this property is looking good, set up that meeting with the town planner, town engineer, phone call, and get that conceptual drawn. There's no reason not to get a conceptual drawn. If your property's a go, in the next 2 or 3 days, you want that conceptual drawn so you can get into town. There's just not a lot of time when everybody's out there looking at the same properties.
Nice. And we did have a couple questions come in prior to our meeting, so just want to start answering those as well. This one's from Marcus, and I'll throw this to you, Kevin. Kind of general, but financing options. What are we looking like? What are we looking at in the self-storage world with financing?
There's a lot of different financing options that you can use in the self-storage world. There's a lot of private lenders out there. Of course, SBA loans, 504 and 7A loans are the most popular that we use for financing. There's something now that a lot of people are using called crowd sharing, where you can pull money together for different specific, self-storage projects. So there's a lot of financing available out there. It's just kind of being able to get with people who understand the process, that can walk you through. And even at times now we're finding that, maybe a higher interest rate through a private lender can be better by the time you decide to refinance, pay all the bank loans. So when you want to get into the financing, the best thing to do is come in, get in the dirt, get with people who know what they're doing, see what you have now in equity to invest, and then go out there and look at every single option to decide which one's better for you on your project.
Yeah, I know, a lot of our owners just go the SBA route. It's 15% down compared to 30 to 40% if going traditional. So, it's these interest rates that spiked up, when they come back down, it'll make the projects pencil much easier than where we're at right now.
Absolutely.
Hey, Garrett, if I can just add a couple of quick sentences so people have a little bit of a grasp. A bank loan, you're going to put down 30 to 50%.
Right.
Let's say you're taking a $7 million loan. That's at 30% down, that's $2.1 million down. Plus you have to have the carrying costs for the interest and your staff and everything, because the banks don't allow for that typically. And it's actually 30 to 50% down for a traditional bank. Banks are getting tougher and tougher. If you have to put 50% down, you're putting $3.5 million down on that $7 million. SBA is typically going to be somewhere around 15% down, and they allow you to borrow the carrying costs. So, in an example we use quite often, with $1 million, $1.5 million, you can build a real large facility with an SBA loan and take home a very large 6-figure income. So, but you're only going to have one SBA loan, so you have to think about that, because there is limits on how much you can borrow from the SBA, but certainly enough for self-storage. I'd like to offer Garrett's services here. If anybody's looking for an SBA lender, just email Garrett, that's with 2 R's and 2 T's, at Storage Authority, and he'll tell you our 2 top lenders. He'll introduce you to them. Just send him that email, Garrett@storageauthority.com.
And just to piggyback, this is another question from Dan. And his question was, how do you calculate the working capital needed for negative cash flow during ramp up? Is there a formula? Is it based on projections or feasibility?
Let me answer that first. Absolutely, there's a formula. You have carrying costs. First thing you have to do is project how long it's going to take you to build the facility, because that's period of interest that you're paying for that. And then you have to determine how long it's going to take you to ramp up to the break-even point. So you're doing a complete P&L, and it's gonna show you that at this point you break even. But it starts with knowing your community. If there's a lot of self-storage being ramped up, being built right now, that's a danger zone, because it can take you 4 to 5 years to fill up. If everybody is already full around you, you can fill up in 2 to 3 years. If you got a great system, you can fill up in 1 year. So there is a formula, you know, but a lot of people get a feasibility study done by a third party expert. And that provides that example right in there. Unfortunately, you're spending $8,000 to get that. So hopefully you're looking at a real property. Right now, I'd like to make you another free offer, but this time not with Garrett, this time with Kevin, and his email is Kevin at Storage Authority. You know, if you give Kevin a call, he'll show you a combination of things, you know, how you determine your P&L and how do you determine your carrying costs. I'd be glad to sit down and do that. You know, and especially if you have a property, it's much easier to do if you're looking at a specific property, because if you're looking at a specific property, you know, a lot of these things are easier to determine, you know, what's the construction cost, what's the land look like, and a bunch of other things. But take Kevin up on that. You know, it takes an hour or two of his time. But, you know, that's the business we're in, is helping people figure that out.
You know, and to piggyback a little bit off of what Mark's saying, when Garrett asked me earlier what some of the biggest pitfalls that you run into in development, misjudging market demand, like Mark's talking about, there is one of the biggest pitfalls you can have. And you can misjudge it 2 directions. You can say there's too much demand and be wrong, and you can say there's too little demand and be wrong. And ultimately, you really have to be careful when you go into a development process in the self-storage industry, and you're looking to build a self-storage on a particular parcel, in judging what the market demand really is. And for instance, we've found that a lot of folks are going out there turning down parcels because they think it's in a high per capita area, which is the metric we've used for many years determining. But what we're finding is it may be a high per capita area, which means there are a lot of storage rooms in the area per the population. But what we're finding is a lot of these facilities are full. A lot of these facilities have high rates, which is showing us that there's demand. So not only can you misjudge demand on the basis of there's not enough and you don't fill your facility up quick enough, like Marc is saying, but you can also misjudge it the other way and miss out on opportunities because you go, oh, there's already several storages in this area. I'm going to avoid it, when right there was a high demand area all along.
Yeah, good point. Good point. It seems the square foot per capita is definitely falling wayside to how high the rates are, and is everybody sold out? You know, now that we're looking at that. Question to you then, here, Kevin, back to development. What's the #1 unexpected land feature that adds substantial construction costs to your project?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, from wetlands to extreme topography issues to underground utilities and rocky terrain. But for me, the one I've seen derail project the most is poor soil conditions. So you go in, you think you've got a flat piece of ground, it's the right shape, everything looks good, and then you go in and get your geotech and you realize that you couldn't build a storage shed on it and it would hold up. That can just add hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost trying to get infill and do different things to get that soil suitable to build a a very heavy self-storage facility with driveways that's going to have to support big trucks coming in and out. So it's very important when you go under contract in due diligence to look at those soil conditions and make sure you get the right test done, because it could certainly derail your entire project, Garrett.
Yeah, and just to be clear in the terminology, so as soon as your contract is signed, you need to do soil borings, soil testing, and it's called a geotech report. So, while the other side is looking at your contract and it's all getting good, you should be getting a proposal for your geotech report and borings. Another one, I've seen it. The place looks great. Ledge down 6 inches to 2 feet. I've seen that derail projects before. I've certainly seen soils that just have no bearing capacity. When he says bad soils, he means you put a foundation in and it's going to turn one way or the other because it's got poor soils, poor bearing capacity. So it doesn't work. I've also seen large dump sites, 3 or 4 feet of fill from 50 years ago. The trees have covered it up. You can't see it walking the property. And that's 4 feet of material that has to be hauled out and put back in. So get your
Or you go in
geotech.
under the ground, Mark, and it's nothing but rock. I mean,
Right.
that can be a
Ledge.
huge
Yep.
issue as well.
Get your geo report done now. Too many people wait till, it's the site plan's done and and it's time to get the buildings done. The architect requires that before he designs the building. So a lot of people wait till just then, but no, you have to do it immediately as part of your, 60-day due diligence period before your money goes hard.
Just piggybacking that question, Mark, when you're talking about ledge and whatnot, what kind of expense can that add to a project if you get those reports back and you find out there's ledge everywhere?
Well, ledge is expensive. I designed the first Walmart in Connecticut, and they had one patch of ledge, and it was $2 million to remove this. It's so expensive that if you have, if there's ledge everywhere at 2 or 3 feet on this site, it's so expensive, it's not worth building. It's not worth, unless it's just a corner of one building, it's, people are not going to give their land away. So it's just difficult because we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars if you got to do a lot of blasting to remove that ledge. Sometimes it's just one corner and it can be torn with a machine and it might only add 200,000 to the cost. But that's why you need to get that geotech. They plot the borings right on the map and the depth to it, so you can kind of figure out. It might even be that having this and it's down 6 feet to ledge, now that we know that, we can design our facility different. We can raise our facility 2 more feet so even the storm drainage doesn't hit the ledge. So you want that information before you start the design. After the design is on its way, it's too late to incorporate best design practices to avoid that ledge.
Yeah, and just thinking of go back to Kevin with the soil stabilization. Just thinking about one of our owners, Scott, there in Mulberry, he had to deal with that, and he got a pretty hefty unexpected bill. But we did that early on. We evaluated. I mean, he had a beautiful site. He ended up selling for 14.2 million. But that kind of stuff comes up, and you need the right team on your hand to say, this is still a great site. You're getting a fantastic deal on the dirt. These are the unexpected expenses that come up, but forged ahead though, and it really paid off for them.
And Garrett, I'll tell you, not just the soil, but once you get into contract and you're doing your due diligence, there are so many things that you need to go over. And if you don't have the experience knowing exactly what to go over, you're going to miss something. Just recently, a friend of mine purchased a piece of land in Florida. He has a 250-point due diligence list, and he did not see on his due diligence list that there was a what do you call it, a endangered species turtle on the lot. So they ended up losing thousands of dollars because they couldn't end up building on that lot. And we've got a long due diligence list that you can go through because it is just so important, and it can cost you thousands of dollars in testing fees and all these things if you just don't do a good job on due diligence, and it can basically take out the whole project if you don't. Certainly costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars if you go through with something and then find out you can't do it. That's even worse.
Yeah, that environmental study needs to be done up front. Some landowners in Florida do it as part of the sale, because there's a lot of turtles that have to be relocated or 200-foot buffer. And to relocate one turtle is about $27,000. So it's not a problem if there's only one, but if there's multiple. So environmental due diligence, that's another one. Contamination of old buildings, of the soils you do in the beginning. There's just a host of things you do in that 60 days, including the boundary, topo, wetland surveys. All those need to be started immediately. The week after your contract is signed, those proposals should be in your hand to sign, so you can get that work done fast. Even if you don't believe there's wetlands on your property, you cannot always tell. Sometimes there's no signs of water, it's just the vegetation. But a soil scientist will know whether there's wetlands or not. So, it even pays to spend $300 to get a letter saying there's no wetlands on the property by a soil soil engineer. You know, the planning and zoning or the wetlands board is not going to take the word of your contractor, your friend, or your real estate agent for sure. They want proof by a soil scientist, and they're going to require that letter. So order it away week 1. It's not a big deal. And if you find that the whole site is wetlands, you save tons of money in design. So it's another good thing finding these things out early so you don't waste money.
As soon as when that contract's signed, I mean, you know, the sense of urgency that needs to take place and communication with your team, you know, weekly calls, bi-weekly calls, you know, you just got to move fast when you get going. Question now coming in from Emmanuel. I'll throw this to you, Kevin. Can land be used as a down payment with the SBA?
Land can be used in conjunction for down payment with SBA, but it would be best to get with a lender on that. Make sure they can take you through the process. There's several different things you can do. It can be used as an equity contribution, a loan to value ratio. Some people can use them in joint partnerships and joint ventures. Really best if you have a piece of land to call Garrett, like Marc said, Garrett at storageauthority.com. Schedule a talk through with Garrett. He'll get you in touch with some lenders that can let you know what you can do with that land. And it's definitely a plus if you have land, but just a moniker out there, just because you have a piece of land doesn't necessarily mean that that land's a good place to build self-storage. So you really want to get with a professional and make sure that you do, you know, your demographics reports to make sure that that land's in a good place. Because if you got a piece of land that's, you know, far off the beaten path and outside of residential areas, you know, you may be hurting yourself trying to build on that piece of land. And whether you could use that piece of land as some type of, you know, equity towards a loan, I think that's something you'd need to discuss with banks, Garrett.
Yeah, just real quickly, in general, the SBA loans do count the equity you have in the land. In general, they do count that. So
yes.
But there's, like you said, there's other things to know. So, but in general, start with that assumption and contact the SBA lenders.
Yes.
Yeah, I know a lot of you know, owners that come to us with land. A lot of times our recommendation is, you know, sell it and let's look for a piece that makes sense. You know, just to piggyback what Kevin said, you know, just because you own the land, you don't want to fit a round peg into a square hole. You know, let's keep it moving.
Yeah, we get that all the time. People call us up and say, "Hey, I got a piece of land," and you know, and when we start to look at it, we go, you know, gosh, you're not going to be able to get a good rate there, or you know, you only have 500 people driving by this thing a day, or you know, you're back in the backwoods, nobody's anywhere near you. You know, when Marc talked earlier about ramping up a storage facility, all of those things count. And so if you build in the wrong place, you can really run up against some issues getting your facility full. And then on top of that, somebody may build between you and the residents and even cause a bigger problem. So, you know, just because you have a piece of land doesn't necessarily mean it's a great opportunity to build storage on it. Get with a professional and do a full study to see if that's a good place to build. And if it is, wonderful. If not, then move on and do some other things like Garrett's talking about.
Yeah, and just another plug for Kevin. Before you pay $8,000 for a feasibility study, get with Kevin, let him spend an hour on your property. You know, sometimes in an hour, the best we can come up with, hey, now it's time to pay for that study because we can't tell. Or, but often in an hour, we can tell this site doesn't work at all, or this is a great site. So, you know, if you got a piece of property, you know, give Kevin your information and he'll take a quick look at it for free.
About banking landmines, I'll throw this to you, Marc. How about you know, many developers learn this when it's too late. You see, you know, one or two just huge landmines when it comes to lending that you know, people are playing from, or developers are playing from behind.
Well, you know, every bank is slightly different. There are certainly a lot of things to be aware of. Debt coverage service ratios are often in many loans at 1.3. That is the normal. But in self-storage, it should be 1.1, which means you're making 10% more than your expenses. 1.3, you know, will certainly happen when you're full, but usually they want these debt coverage service ratios in one year. And we don't necessarily make those in self-storage like we do in retail because we have customers before we build. So that's one item. Certainly there's many items that you want to look at. There's different types of SBA loans. There's different prepayment penalties depending on the type. And there's different interest rates. I saw an interest rate today for an SBA bank that was prime -1. And so you're seeing for the first time, it used to be prime +2 3 weeks ago, and now this is an offer for 30 days. Well, you can bet I got a phone call into this guy because he's leading that year in the future right now. So there's a lot of things happening, but the other thing is it takes time to get that loan and a lot of information. Our guy Rick that's under construction, yeah, he got his loan in 2 months. But you know what? I've seen a lot of people get their loan in 4 months because every time SBA asked something, it was 3 or 4 days before somebody got back to them. And unfortunately, these bankers don't ask for everything at once. They ask for it when they get to that. They have 3 or 4 people working on your loan. When that person gets to that question, they ask for it. So you got to have the mindset, I got to take tomorrow off from work and get that back into the bank. Otherwise, you're going to be at a 3 to 4 month approval process. And we buy land with an option means we don't buy that land quite often until we have our bank loan. So if our option's a year and we're going to take 4 months of that to get the bank loan, we're in trouble. We have to plan on buying that land with our own money. So it's a timing thing that is a landmine. All SBA lenders used to say it was 2 months. Now they're actually saying it's closer to 3 months. But I'm sure there's a lot of lenders out there who'll tell you less than 2 months. But that's all predicated on you getting that information they ask back on the same day. So make that a priority when you go out for your loan.
Yeah, back to having that sense of urgency. It seems like you have all day or a year. The next thing you know, 4 months you just lost because you weren't moving fast.
One more minefield on loans is really make sure you understand from the bank what you can include in that loan. Our franchisees, a lot of banks, our franchise fees is included in their equity. The land's included in their equity. Their first year of insurance is included in that equity. The interest payments are included. The staff's included. Marketing's included. Other banks, they have some limits on what's included in the carrying costs. So be very, very specific. And instead of using carrying costs, use carrying costs plus all the things that you want included. And you have to ask. If you don't ask, not everything's covered. But typically, they will give you everything you want if you ask and brought it up. But they're not really on your side. They've got a job to do over there, to some degree. So, and we have a job to do. So, ask, can I include all these things in my loan? But you also have to remember, you're going to make more profits with a standard loan because you're not paying the SBA fees. You have more money to put into the project. So the more you can put into a project, the better off you're going to be right now because you automatically start making 7 or 8% on the money you put into the loan. So, all right, Garrett, back to you.
Yep, I'll shoot this one over to Kevin. This is regarding zoning. What's the biggest zoning minefields that must be handled early on to avoid disaster and lose significant time?
Well, the biggest one is not being in self-storage to begin with. If you're not in a zoned area for self-storage, you are going to have to go through the city processes. They're all different. They all can take you through a long process. And at the end, most of the time they will say no. It doesn't mean it's not worth it. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It's just the facts of life with that. So if you can get in an area that is zoned for self-storage, Garrett, it's always a plus. It could save you thousands of dollars and months and months and months of time. Remember, when you go to these cities, you're on their timeline. You can submit to them. You'll have a meeting with them. You'll submit for an SUP or COP. You'll admit for a zoning change. And if you do those things, there's a good opportunity that might be 2 or 3 months down the road before it gets down into a hearing and before it gets to city council or whatever their process is. So at the end of the day, if it's a commercial area you're in and you could submit for an SUP, that's a little less lengthy process than if you have to do an entire zoning change. If you have to do an entire zoning change, just from my experience, it's a lengthy process. It costs money, it costs time, and most of the time they do say no. So you just need to go down to the city, get your feel for it. And if that means you need to go talk to city council people, go talk to them. They'll talk to you. They'll tell you, you'll take the temperature of what they are on the city. I've been into city council people and they told me, nope, we don't want any self-storage there. We're not going to do it. If they're telling you that, it may not be worth your time or your money to go for that zoning change. But if they give you a good reception and say, hey, I think we can do it, then you're going to have to make that decision to go through it. But just remember, even if you do think it's positive, there's still a good chance that they may say no, and that can cost you a lot of time and money.
Well said. I want to make sure I'm getting through all of our questions that came in, and this is from Bill. I'll shoot this over to you, Mark. Kind of general, how much cash down is required?
Yeah, we talked about that before. And so, with an SBA, if you're doing a loan under $5 million, you can go with that 504 SBA loan, and that requires 10% down. If you're building a large project like 80 or 90,000 square feet, like some of our guys, because they want to make $500,000 or more a year, you're going to have to go with the 504, which has it has a lower interest rate, but it allows you to borrow up to $10+ million, and they want 15% down. So there's two SBA loans, 10%, 15%, and sometimes you borrow for both of them, because only the carrying costs are permitted in the 7A. So sometimes you borrow from both those loans, and it used to be that bank loans were always 30%, but in the latest we've seen a lot of banks wanting 40 and 50% down, because they're in the negative as far as all these banking standards, because they have poor loans. One interesting option is help me out here, Kevin and Garrett. The banks, people own the banks. What's the name I'm looking for here?
The private equity or private lenders?
No, that the banks that are owned by their depositors.
Oh, credit unions.
Credit unions. There you go. I got a little minds. Credit unions happens to be one of the best places to invest and to get a loan. So sometimes you at a credit union, you can get a loan for 20% down. And sometimes 20% down at a 1 point lower interest rate than an SBA, and you didn't pay that $300,000 in SBA fees for the guarantee of your loan, you can find out that's a better deal. And you didn't have to pay $150,000 3 years down the road to refinance, a prepayment clause. So check out the credit unions as well. And like what we do for everything is, 3 is the minimum bids we get for everything. And, I know a lot of people want to go with one. Now, this guy's the best. You learn a lot by getting 3 bids, and I've seen the difference. I've seen projects come in, our final, like the one we have going now in New Jersey, under $80 a square foot. But one of the bidders was over $95 a square foot. So, that's a $17 a square foot difference, so you got to get multiple bids on everything you do, including banking.
And just to, piggyback that question, Mark, this is from another attendee. This is Mohammed. How to start the business? I know a lot of this has to be, how much capital do you have to deploy, but kind of a general question, but where do they get started?
Yeah, one of the best ways to get started is to start learning the basics. We've got a book. If you email Garrett, 2 R's, 2 T's, is self-storage your vehicle to wealth? And it talks about the pros and cons of self-storage. It talks about how much money you need to invest. and how you figure some of those things out. But the first thing you have to decide is, we know self-storage in general is a good investment. It's actually the number one real estate investment. And I think it's the number two investment in the United States, and laundromats somehow are number one. But you have to figure out how much money you have to invest. Once you have that figured out, then you can determine whether you're going to buy a facility or build a facility, and how much with the bank's money you have. And once you know that, we can show you how to make some assumptions that will show you your financial income or loss. So the first thing is really, once you know what size properties, you can get 10 to 15,000 square feet of self-storage on a property, and you really want to build, if you want to have a high resale value, a low cap rate that the REITs and people buy these facilities for, you want to build a facility for 7 million and sell it for 14 million. You've got to build a facility at least 50,000 square feet. Otherwise it's a real side hobby, which is fine. A lot of people make an extra 25, 35,000. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about making, a retirement income and a retirement fund. So you have to determine how much money you have, what that will buy you, and what the return will be. And then you have to learn, okay, how much time is it going to take? We know if you're going the land route, it's going to take you 6 to 12 months, 8 to 10 hours a week looking for land, and then some time putting it all together consistently. Well, even if you're buying land, you got to have buying a facility, you have to have a longer time frame. If you buy something at a 5 or 6 cap rate and you pay 8% interest, you're losing 3% almost. So you have to look at a lot of factors. I'd be happy to answer that question in more detail. Literally, that's one of the seminars we put on for people considering self-storage. It is just that, and it takes an hour with a slide deck to explain. But a great place to get started is InsideSelfStorage.com. It's a trade magazine. You want to order that for $99 a year or something. You can read that. They have a lot of interesting articles. They don't always go into depth. You can type in my name or Kevin's name or Garrett's name. We've been commissioned many times to write for them. But whatever your subject is, even how to get started, they'll give you some additional ideas. And certainly on our website, StorageAuthorityFranchise.com, we have a set of FAQs that will answer a lot of those questions. I forget how many there are, 15 or 20, but check those out. It's going to answer a lot of questions and bring up more appropriate specific questions versus a longer general question.
On a little bit long, but if another question come in, I want to make sure we're answering everybody's question. This is from Eric. He just said, how did the Jersey guy find his land? Would love to hear how that came together. I think, Marc, you have a little more firsthand experience with that because Rick's been with us for a while.
Yeah, that land was, when that land was found, it goes back to Kevin's zone change concept. When that land was found by a franchisee, it was in a residential area in a sense, one of those business, commercial, residential areas. And so, we went in to look at it for self-storage, and there was no self-storage permitted. But through the grapevine, through the retailers or talking with the staff, the town was putting together a list of permitted items for self-storage in that zone. And all of a sudden we got very ecstatic about it. We drew up a conceptual everybody liked, and really made a lot of sense. And then as it went through the process of putting these regs together, the regulation actually had 12 points in there that we just simply, on top of our head, we could not meet. I mean, in fact, one of the reg requirements was the property can't be over 6 acres. This property was 12 acres. So literally we had to, give away 6 acres. We're never going to use the rest. It's just 6 acres. We had to ask for a waiver of that one. We had to ask for a waiver of one more item as well. And then all the rest we did a conceptual plan. It wasn't things we liked. One of them was, the maximum size building is 12,000 square feet. So, instead of having 6 buildings, we have 9 buildings. Cost a little bit more. But the funny part of the story is when that came back, the ruling, and our franchise was there at the meeting, he tried to speak up and nope, this is what the rules are going to be. This is it. And the next day he called extremely sad. He says, I've had it with these guys and we're dropping this property. And I said, we've gone so far. What's another couple $1,000s in another couple weeks? Let's do a conceptual and see how many of those 12 crazy items that we can actually make happen. And like I said, we made them all happen, but 2, we went in for the variance and they granted them. And this is going to be one incredible profit center for Rick and his team. But it was one of those close ones where everybody was about to give up, and it was probably one when you looked at it as a newcomer right now and the property next door, you'd say, no, I'm passing on this. I don't want to do these crazy things or be limited to 6 acres or whatever it was, 5 acres. Because at 5 acres with all the other setbacks, it was 100-foot setbacks and it was some large things they required from the residential neighbors. But because it was 12 acres, we could give them the setbacks that they wanted, but we ended up using those setbacks in part of our design. But so never give up, but don't go crazy either. Do that concept plan.
All right, we're going a little long now, so I just want to make sure if there's any other questions out there before we wrap up. We didn't hit all the topics. We were going to try to compress it in this 45-minute window. So if there's anything else out there, if you want to unmute and ask a question, throw it in the chat. I'll read it out loud.
Garrett, while people are doing that, since this is a topic about pitfalls and navigating pitfalls in self-storage, one extreme one I want to bring up: if you're going in and you're doing a self-storage development, hire experienced self-storage professionals, hire experienced self-storage professionals, hire experienced self-storage professionals. I can't say it enough, from your architect to your engineer to your general contractor. There are a lot of wonderful people out there who can do that job. But if they do not have self-storage experience, it's going to be more difficult for them, and it's going to be more difficult for you. And on top of that, a lot of developers I've seen go out there and hire good people, and then they wash their hands of the process and say, okay, I've hired good people, I'm done. Stay engaged in the process from every step of the way, from your contract, finding land, through your due diligence, through your design. If you don't have your hands on it and you're not engaged in it every day, not every day, but engaged in it as it comes along as the owner developer, then it's almost every time you're going to miss something. Something's going to come up. Hire experienced self-storage people, stay engaged in the process. And if you don't know how to do that, reach out to people who've had experience in the process, like your local self-storage associations are a great place to go. I just can't say enough. You cannot get enough self-storage experience when you're developing a project if you've never developed one before.
Yeah, Garrett, I'd like to hit 2 points that are critical as well, kind of along the same lines as Kevin. I see cost overruns on most jobs of $300,000 to $500,000, practically every single job, because of incomplete or poor plans. And they you get them. They're 30 pages long from the professional civil engineer, 30 pages from the architect. Half the time they had a guy working on them. This was his 3rd time he's working on them, and they don't have the time to check them. But let me give you a tip. What we do on all of our plans, we put on a note. I'm going to read it here. Everything shown on these plans shall be provided and installed by the general contractor. Put that note bold on your plans, because everything on your plans he's not bidding. typically they don't bid the video systems. They don't bid the access systems. They don't include the signage. Some of them tell you they didn't include that, others don't, or others miss it. It's so crazy that you have to put that note on the plan. But let me give you an example. You know, there's just not enough details on any plan. It's going to show a nice gate. Hopefully it shows how wide the opening is and everything, but that's all it says, you know. But I'll tell you what, you're gonna get a gate control system that's the cheapest in the world, and you're not gonna have battery backup. That means when somebody's inside your site and the power goes out, which it goes out 2 or 3 times a year, how does that person get out of that facility? They climb over the fence, they hit it with your car because there's no battery backup. Trust me, maybe you're smart enough to put a phone number, gate malfunction, call me, and in the middle of the night or 11 o'clock at night, you got to go there because there's a lever to pull and push that gate open manually. But if it had battery backup, you wouldn't have that problem. The same thing with video cameras. If you just show the location of the video cameras and call them video cameras, you're going to end up with video cameras that have 30-day backup or no backup when you wanted 60-day backup. When you actually look at them there, you're going to have cameras that give you video of poor quality or can't register far enough. Or you know, you were thinking one camera took 2 hallways, which they have cameras like that, but if they were designed that way by your architect but not clear, the guy's buying a one-way camera and you're not going to see down that other hallway. So you know, there's a lot of, you know, poorly designed access, a lot of things. Just for everybody, you know, we can't go into a lot of detail here. Kevin just wrote an article on the 7 deadly minefield sins. It's going to be published in Inside Self-Storage next month or the month after. You definitely want to read that because incomplete or poor design plans are one of the biggest problems. And the second biggest, another big problem is not understanding the contractor's bid and contract. You get an AIA document, it's like a half-inch thick and you think it's mumbo jumbo and you don't read it. Well, you need to read every word of it. You need to have your architect read every word of it because it is written for the contractor, not for you. There's never been a single contractor's contract that didn't need a 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 page addendum to point out these things. The things that aren't on the plans, like, hey, we want a battery backup on our gate. But more than that, you talk about a lot of things that, you know, they would not do. I mean, like in our New Jersey system right now, I can go there and I can see what's happening. They've got a full-time cam on that, and then they got another share file for the photographs. You need that on every project. We've caught in design flaws by, you know, they take pictures and they put them in the share folder. So there's a lot of things that you need to put in the addendum. And one of my favorite dislikes of these contracts is it says that the architect has the right to answer all the contractor's questions. You know, without your approval, they can make changes. Every single AIA contract says the architect can make changes without the owner's approval. We change that every time, that nothing can be changed without the owner's approval. The architect can look at it, come up with a solution, but maybe it was the architect that made the mistake and now he's coming up with a secondary solution that doesn't cost as much, but it gives you a poor quality product. You've got to be involved in any change orders and they have to be in writing. I know I've said this to everybody, but you're still going to do them with a handshake and it's going to screw you over once or twice. These contractors do this for a living. You don't, and they know how to get away with it. So, you know, another tip is when you get that bid, ask them what's not included. You know, go ahead, ask them what's not included on these plans. So you know. But again, in that article that Kevin put together, you're going to see a lot of specific examples. So get your subscription to Inside Self-Storage magazine.
And just to back Mark up, we had plans come across our desk just this week where the keypad access was on the passenger side. We had it where there was a 20-foot driveway and you need, you know, 30-degree turn radius for these big U-Haul trucks that go through. And these plans came from an supposed experienced self-storage designer. And so at the end of the day, you know, Mark is 100% right. No matter who it is, you have to be engaged. You have to look, because these design flaws can cost you tons of money. I mean, just if they went ahead and installed that gate access where it was and it had to be moved later, $25,000 to move it. And that's certainly cost that you don't want to have to do later on. And now you're ripping up concrete and doing stuff that should have never been done, makes your facility look terrible. So Mark's 100% right. It happens every day. Make sure you're engaged in the process.
Yeah, and my last tip, and then you know, I'll be done, is do a better job of reading. And this is what I mean. You get a boundary survey early on from the developer, and everybody sees the boundary survey. They're all excited. It matches the area. Read every single note. I can't tell you how many times, probably 3 out of 10 boundary surveys, when I read every single note, 3 out of 10, those notes have detrimental things in there that you don't see just looking at the survey. You know, so if you can't read the notes, ask for a cleaner copy. They'll say things like, hey, from this report, there, you know, the so-and-so has an easement through the middle of this property. We didn't show it because we couldn't verify where it was. But there's a document that says it exists. And so it probably does exist. So read it. And the same thing when the realtors put out flyers. I can't tell you how many parcels of land get to Garrett, Drew, Kevin, myself, Josh, and 5 minutes I'm looking at it and it says, you know, out of the 7, and little fine print, out of the 7 acres, 4 of it is wetlands. It's right there in the flyer in little teeny language. But, you know, read everything complete. You know, your boundary survey, your geotech, your environmental study. You read it, every word, because if it pops out, then you can ask the expert. You can ask the person who put it together. But you'll see some of these things that just don't feel right to you. So take that time and read it, whatever it might be. Surveys, studies, geotech report.
Super valuable points there, Mark. So, you know, appreciate you sharing. Any other questions, or we're going to wrap this up? Now, all of our contacts are on storageauthorityfranchise.com. You know, we always recommend, you know, check us out on the blog, sign up to our newsletter. We're always trying to share the value with our community. So you can find us there. Our next webinar is going to be October 3rd at 1 p.m. And we're going to go in detail on what's it really mean to have a high-tech, high-touch facility. And it starts with design. Automation's important, but you still have to stay customer centric if you want to be the Ritz in our space. So be on the lookout for that next registration form. And definitely any closing thoughts, Kevin?
No, if anyone has any questions, we're always available to answer questions. Email, give us a phone call. There's no stupid questions in self-storage. The only stupid questions are the questions that are never asked. So please reach out if you ever need us.
All right. Definitely appreciate everybody's time. And, you know, we'll see you on the next webinar.
You need some play out music, Garrett.